and welcome once again to Quoth Raven, Lewis Bright Raven. I'm your host, Lewis Bright Raven. My co-host this evening is John Norris. Say hello, John.
Hello.
And tonight's topic, every Friday night we're going to do a weekly genre discussion. This week is horror, and we're going to talk about horror films, horror TV shows that happen to be some of our more favorite films and shows and why. But we're also going to do a quick tribute to Swamp Thing, the 2019 series that was put out for the DC Universe app. That was very short-lived. That AT&T stupidly canceled, like right after they aired the pilot on the network. They did re-release it recently, the whole show on the CW, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So, how are you doing this week, John?
I've been doing well. Can't complain. Everybody in my family's keeping safe and healthy, so that's good.
Okay, well, that's better than me and my dad. I mentioned it last night. My dad went to the doctor, and he fell a couple weeks back, and he hurt his hand, and he wouldn't go to the doctor and see it. I told him I thought it was broken, but he wouldn't listen to me. Well, he went to his doctor yesterday, and they did x-rays, and sure enough, he's going to see a specialist on Monday because it's broken. He's an idiot. And as for me, well, I'm dealing with a Charlie horse. I woke up with this today, and it's not fun. I get them every once in a while. When I get them, it's like the whole leg. You think all your muscles are pulled off the bone or something. It's terrible. But anyway, it's life. We got to deal with it. So let's talk about Swamp Thing.
What to do?
Swamp Thing from 2019 was created and developed by Gary Doberman and Mark Verheiden, based upon the works of Len Wein, Bernie Wrightson, Alan Moore, Stephen Bissett, Rick Veitch, and many, many others who have worked on the comic series. Forgive me for anybody I didn't name. They are mentioned at the in the special thanks credits on the DVD, though, if you happen to get it, or the Blu-ray. The number of episodes that they aired was 10, and it actually was supposed to be 13. That's another way that Time Warner AT&T screwed those people. They cut their show by 3 episodes for the season. And like I said, about a week into the show, I think they only showed the pilot, and they'd already told them, this is it, you're not getting any more. So I don't know why. It just didn't make much sense. But anyway, the concept is CDC doctor Abby Arcane returns to her hometown of Murray's, Louisiana, after learning of a life-threatening epidemic. She meets Alec Holland, a disgraced biologist who works for the town's manipulative entrepreneur Avery Sunderland, that had uncovered the source of the illness. As the duo prepare to collect the evidence and present it, Alec is attacked and presumed dead. But instead, the mutant genetic properties of the swamp combined with his body and reform him into the creature known as Swamp Thing. Together, the duo try to protect the environment while fighting the Sunderland family, as Abby has her own demons in the past that tie her to the Sunderlands. Like we say, sadly, they missed the show before they even completed filming the full 13-issue run, or episode run, and they did cancel it, announced it that they were canceling like right after the first episode aired on the DC Universe TV app. Effectively, though, when they put on the CW this past year, that's like a syndicated release of the series, the equivalence thereof. There was no intent to continue that I've heard about. I would say the show's for ages 14 and up. What would you say, John?
Yes.
Okay. It's not, that's the right age, not older. I mean, there's nothing gratuitous nudity or anything like that.
I mean, there is some language, but I mean, it's nothing that you wouldn't hear practically in any other film or TV show.
True. And what was there? I mean, if it airs, if you're watching this after 10 p.m. on a regular network, it'd be appropriate in today's time.
Yes.
I gave it a 5-star rating. What do you give it?
Me too.
Okay.
I think this is the best version of Swamp Thing in film or TV that we've ever gotten. And there's of course the Wes Craven movie, The Return of Swamp Thing, and then both the live action and the animated TV show from the 90s. And while they have
all of them have their charms and qualities.
Yes.
Absolutely.
But one thing this series established is from the get-go is that it is not campy at all.
Mm-hmm. And almost every one of the other ones has some level of camp.
Yeah.
That's true. This is definitely a darker tone version of the series, but I think it's also that the other films are always about Alec Holland, and Alec is the focal character. Swamp Thing is the focal character. This show, however, is much more balanced with Abby, Arcane.
Yeah.
And also other characters in the series. There's a character, I can't think of the actor's name, the character's name rather, but he's an actor who runs the video store.
Well, Ian Ziering, who plays
that's the actor, but what is the character's name?
Dan Cassidy, aka Blue Devil.
Thank you. I can remember Blue Devil, but I couldn't remember his actual name for the character. Yes, that was awesome. I always thought that Ziering's performance in that was excellent. I wish they'd done a little bit more with the Blue Devil character. They probably would if the series hadn't been canceled.
Yeah.
But that was another element. They had Madame Xanadu in this, which was an interesting version of the character as well. Not what I would have expected. I would like to see a little bit more of that character's backstory, but they had so much going on with all this rich tapestry with the world building they were doing that really none of the other versions had that kind of level of world building.
Right.
I think that's one of the reasons why this version was so much stronger.
And I liked the inclusion of the Phantom Stranger as well. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, and again, the Phantom Stranger not just tied to Swamp Thing, but also to
Blue Devil.
Yeah, exactly. So that's also a wonderful type situation. The only thing I didn't really care for was that they changed to get Abby Arcane. In the comics, it's Dr. Anton Arcane who's the villain. It's Sunderland. And I was like, well, it's not enough to make me care enough to like poo-poo all over it or anything like that. But it was something that just, it was like something that made my ears twitch, I guess you could say. It was like, okay. Well, I mean, it's not enough to matter because what they were trying to do was develop more of Abigail's background and make it a little bit different than what's in the comics, but still solidly correct. The only other thing that was missing from this, and I'm sure if Swamp Thing had ever been treated right and it got into the full 13 episodes or went into a second season, we would have seen John Constantine.
Probably so.
But, it's kind of, seeing as Constantine's already had his own show that didn't last very long on NBC, unfortunately, another show that was unfortunately overlooked. And he also was in Legends of Tomorrow. They like the actor who plays him, so I would have expected to have seen him. That was the only other thing I was like, that's kind of missing, but oh well. It would be interesting to see what they do with that. What did you think of the characters, though, in general? I mean, I thought that Will Patton did a great job as Avery Sunderland.
I thought the series was very well acted, and not just from the main cast. Like everybody in the show was great.
Mm-hmm. Okay, when you say everybody, I mean there weren't that very many guest stars.
No,
I guess you could say there were some. I mean, you kind of wonder though. I mean, yes, Jake Busey was in the thing, and you're like, you probably didn't realize that.
actually, no, I didn't.
Yeah, he was one of the hunters at the end of the series where they were hunting Swamp Thing. He was in there as like the leader that was talking smack with the sunglasses over his face. That was Jake Busey. There was a couple other people in there that you might not have realized were in the show. But people don't. You see Tim Russ as a doctor. And people, they equate him with Tuvok mostly, unfortunately. But he did a really nice job for the little role that he played.
Mm-hmm.
Adrienne Barbeau's appearance in the movie or in the series later on as the new CDC director at the Atlanta branch. For those who don't know, Adrienne Barbeau was in the Wes Craven movie. Yeah. That was a nice callback.
Yeah,
to bring her in. So there was some interesting things going on there. But what did you think of how it ended? Where they had
knowing that they had to culminate 13 episodes into 10, I thought they did knowing that, I thought they did a really good job of bringing at least some sense of closure to things. But
yet they didn't bring closure because there was so much stuff that you're like, what's going to happen next?
Yes,
and things that were going on. I mean, we don't want to necessarily spoil for people who haven't seen the show, but we don't know what happens to like 5 of the characters.
Right.
And there's open-ended stuff for Abby and Swamp Thing both. But more importantly, like the sheriff, we can assume what may have happened.
Yeah.
We saw, but can we? Because she's in the swamp. We don't know if she could be affected by the mutant genetic properties and something could happen to her. We don't know what's going on with Jason Woodrue. We do, but we don't.
Yes. I thought it was like, no, they had like if I thought they couldn't have canceled it before, when I saw that scene, I was like, you bastards, you can't cancel this show.
For those of you, I guess we got to give a little bit of spoiler. Jason Woodrue is a scientist that studies Swamp Thing, and his wife suffers from Alzheimer's dementia, and he thinks that the mutant genetic properties of Swamp Thing will cure his wife's illness. So he cooks up pieces of Swamp Thing, and he was going to feed it to her, but he says, well, I'm not going to try it on you. I'll try it on myself first, just to prove that I'm, being a fair scientist. And
they work better than he could possibly have imagined.
Yeah, he becomes Pharaonic Man, which is a Swamp Thing type villain, and he's very much like Swamp Thing, but he has different abilities in Swamp Thing as well.
And I will say, for those who may not know, if you have the DVD or the Blu-ray, it is the after credit scene at the end of the final episode.
Right.
So,
yeah. So make sure you catch that. That is a very unexpected thing to put that on there, tack that on in the DVD, and then say we're not doing it anymore. It's just But I understand why they did it. I mean, look at the beautiful costume they did for the guy and everything.
Right.
They had to show it. I mean, they couldn't leave that on the cutting.
And I thought, and speaking of costumes, I thought they did a terrific job on Swamp Thing's costume.
Yeah, I think they did an amazing job on that. I thought they did an amazing job really with all the characters. Even though I would have liked to see a little bit more Blue Devil in a more straight up system, they kind of made him more like Johnny, not Johnny Lightning, but Johnny Thunder, type character, the genie from Johnny Thunder rather than that. And then when he transforms, he goes back to. I was like, well, you could have just put him in a costume,
Mm-hmm.
Make him wear the mask and have it do, but no big deal one way or the other, really. Again, that's something I would love to see a spin-off series of, to see where he was going after that.
Mm-hmm. And I would say Ian Ziering looks good for his age. It really does.
All of them look really good for their age.
They do.
When you think about it, I mean, Jennifer Beal is not a spring chicken.
Nope.
She's up there.
She's not the Flashdance girl anymore.
No, but she still looks good.
Yes, she does.
Virginia Madsen.
Yeah.
Is not. Again, she's in her late 50s, early 60s. Doesn't really look it, but again, Tim Russ is not young. He looks reasonably seasoned, for a doctor that has experience for his role. But he doesn't, he doesn't look old. In a lot of ways, the lead actress, Crystal Reed, looks like she gets aged the most throughout the series, in a way. But when you go through all the stuff she's going through, well, it's going to
quite understandable.
Yeah. But what I meant by the end of this thing, when I said what you thought about it, there was a scene where after Swamp Thing comes to a realization, an epiphany, if you will, where he hears Alec Holland and we see Alec's human form standing behind him.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of that particular scene, the way that was? Because knowing what was going on in the context of the story at that time.
I liked it. I thought it was actually quite moving.
Yeah. Because it was like, I'm kind of, go ahead and show the cover to the DVD again. You might as well give them the spoiler. What Swamp Thing is carrying right there is the actual physical body of Alec Holland. Alec does not actually get transformed. What happens is Alec dies, and Alec's memories or his soul or whatever is what gets put into the body of Swamp Thing. And so Swamp Thing is not really Alec, but he has Alec's. It's like having Alex as a conscious form. He's
right.
Kind of like a swamp elemental is really what he is.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't really say that in the show because they haven't figured that out yet. They will though. But yeah. So you got it on DVD. I got it. Or you got it on
Blu-ray.
Yeah, I got it on DVD. Do you think, like I do, that this show had been brought on to CW to begin with, instead of the DC universe, that it would have been a hit?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it should have been a 9 or 10 o'clock slot. I mean, I'm like, this show kicks the crap out of Batwoman, kicks the crap out of Supergirl, kicks the crap out of Arrow. I just, and it's not that I don't like superhero stuff, but a lot of the superhero stuff gets cheesy and hokey with the characters. Mm-hmm. And I lose interest in it. And this was something I didn't lose interest in. When I got the DVD, I watched all 10 episodes straight through marathon. That was a long time, like a year ago, Christmas time, when I first got it. And I kept telling you, you need to see this, you need to see this. I don't know, when did you actually buy the DVD or your copy of the Blu-ray? Do you remember?
Um, it was a couple of months ago.
Yeah, at least. Because I know you got busy.
I did.
And you watched like the first half and you're like, I'll get back to it. I'll get back to it. Because I kept trying to bring you on for this thing so we could talk about it. Which one's your favorite episode?
I really don't. I really don't know. Um, I I think they do a good job of continuing the story from episode to episode, and I just like I said, I think the entire cast is great, so it's really hard for me to pick a favorite episode.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, I guess it makes sense. Um, I think mine would be the trying to think of which one that was. Pull them out. Pull the reads out there for me. Is that the pilot? It's probably Darkness at the Edge of Town, which is the 4th episode,
uh-huh.
where we start seeing some of Abby's backstory and the death of her of the Sunderland's daughter, and how she ties into that, and that whole thing about the ghost of Sunderland's daughter,
Uh-huh.
or the one that's kind of like the Give Me, which is the anatomy lesson, which is the next to last episode, which is based on the actual comic issue written by Alan Moore, where Jason Woodrue is dissecting Swamp Thing. Those would probably be my two favorites. Kind of a toss up between those two. What do you think?
Yeah, I tell you, I like you like seeing what he does to Swamp Thing. Like you really feel for Swamp Thing when he's on that operating table.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was first off, I thought it was really cool how they captured Swamp Thing.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to get into that. I don't want to spoil it. It's a really cool visual. That whole scene
Yep.
in the swamp is really nice visual. I kind of wish that they had done a little bit more science speak, explaining how his internal organs pseudo look like the organs, but they're not the organs, and stuff like that. I would like to have heard a little bit more about that, because there is Alan Moore does that more in the actual story, in the comic, number one.
And again, sorry, like knowing what we do about the series, if they had to cut it down to episodes, it's like it just leaves you wondering, what might have been, or what had they planned to do that they couldn't do.
Yeah. Yeah, well, 3 episodes. I mean, yes, it is 180 minutes of more material, but it's not like they needed to go much further than what they did in that particular episode.
Right.
They covered it pretty well. I just I'm saying like maybe 15 to 20 seconds more exposition of what his internal organs are, and have a little bit more. The special effects are good, but it's interesting because they look the organs look kind of fake, but they're supposed to be looking fake because they're not really they're not real human organs. They're they're vegetation that is pretending to be, so to speak. So it's interesting how that worked. I also liked how the one thing I did like was like Well, you have no nerve endings. You won't feel it anyway. Yeah, I was like, or I can't find any evidence of any nerve ending. You shouldn't be. You're just screaming because you think you're human. I'm like, and I was just like, no, we've already established. Well, we scientifically haven't established, but we've come to the conclusion that yes, plants feel something. We just don't know how they feel it. And to correlate that over to Swamp Thing is, quite interesting, so, but yeah, there, stuff like that is interesting. And like I said, you want to know what happens to Woodrow's wife. You want to know what happens to Sheriff. I kind of want to know.
And her son.
Well, yeah. Well, I do and I don't with him, if you know what I mean. I mean, at the end, if you didn't have the tail end of the thing, with the after scene, I wouldn't have thought about it much. But the only one who's sort of really come to a full conclusion of the storyline is Virginia Madsen's character. And that's kind of a yes but no situation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's still more for that character to potentially be brought back. So it's like there's really a lot of open-endedness to the show, and I wish that wish somebody would have enough sense to bring it back, but oh well. Okay, that's Swamp Thing. Let's go ahead and
I will say one thing I wish they had done for the DVD and Blu-ray is put some special features on there, because if you go to YouTube, they actually have a couple of special features. One about behind the scenes making of Swamp Thing, but they also have a special feature on the making of the suit itself, which is really, really cool. And then like fitting Derek Mears into it. Mm-hmm. And it's really cool. And I wish they had included that on this set, but I guess we should be happy with what we have.
Yeah. Yeah. That's when people say why is AT&T DC don't care nothing? Well, there you go. that's the example of them proving they don't care. But okay, we're going to talk about other horror type TV shows that we like. There's going to be a few shows that you might think would be obvious that we're not going to talk about, like Buffy or Angel, Forever Night. That's partly because those fit under a certain category of like the monsters as heroes, and we're going to come back to those in a future episode as a theme for the night. So that's why we're not including some of those. And we're going to be a little bit, we're not shorthanded, but John's not the huge horror fan that you might think.
Especially of horror TV, like those shows you just mentioned. I actually haven't seen those shows, which is another reason I can't talk about them.
Yeah. Well, that. We have to introduce you to at least some of the episodes, maybe not the whole series, because I mean, there's a lot that you don't need to unpack, but there's some really cool episodes I need to introduce you to, if nothing else. But anyway, we're going to be talking anywhere from the 50s to the present, but a lot of it's going to be focusing a lot when we were growing up in the 80s and 90s. Our first project we're going to talk about is Alfred Hitchcock Presents, which aired from 1955 to 1965 on CBS and NBC respectively. The creator was Alfred Hitchcock, and there was 284 episodes on CBS and 93 at NBC, where it was renamed as the Alfred Hitchcock Hour. The concept was that it was an anthology series of suspenseful drama, dark comedy, supernatural, and horror stories. Hitchcock would appear after the title sequence and drolly introduces the stories from an empty studio or from the set of the current episode. His monologues were written by James B. Allardyce, and at least 2 versions of the opening were shot for every episode. There was a version that was intended for the American audience, which would often spoof recent events, recent commercials, sponsors. Whoops, something's missing here. Okay, let me check something. Okay, never mind. Something got messed up. That's okay. We'll go back here. There we go. He would do that and make a pun or a joke on recent events. And then there would be the UK version, which would be not about recent events or recent commercial sponsor, but would be a kind of swarmy, poking fun at American culture in general that the European market would laugh at. So that's what he would do. There's only 2 openings for that. Now, some of my favorite episodes. I don't know how long have you watched this show, John?
No, which is surprising because I am a Alfred Hitchcock fan. So this is one I definitely need to watch. I just like it.
It's an oversight.
Yeah.
Okay, well, some of my favorite episodes are season 1, episode 4, which is called "Don't Come Back Alive," written by Robert Dennis. Financially strapped couple Frank and Mildred Partridge schemed to have Mildred disappear for 7 years and declared legally dead in order to collect Frank's insurance payoff. Insurance investigator Mr. Kettle suspects that Frank has killed Mildred, and his constant hounding of Frank means that the couple cannot be in contact with one another. The night before the 7 years is up, Frank is visited by Mildred, who has moved on with her life and declares that she wants a divorce and an end to their scheme. In a fit of rage, Frank kills her and buries her in his garden. The next day, Kettle apologizes to Frank for his assumption and offers to help him with his garden. Of course, this is the kind of funny end of the story twist that Alfred Hitchcock is known for. There is a little bit of an odd situation. I mean, 7 years. I mean, I guess technically when someone disappears and you don't have the body to say, you do have to wait 7 years. But it just seems like in 7 years, whatever financial destitution issues he had, he still would have lost whatever he had in that time waiting for his insurance money. That is the one flaw of the plot. But it's just so well performed, and it's got that very dry Hitchcockian dark comedy to it. That's why I like that particular episode. Another one that I enjoy is the case of Mr. Pelham, which is season 1, episode 10, based on the short story by Anthony Armstrong, teleplay by Francis Cockrell. Albert Pelham has a paranoid suspicion that he has a double who is slowly taking over his life and is better at his life than he is. Pelham varies his schedule and buys a one-of-a-kind tie in the hopes of catching his double off guard. But when Pelham returns home, his double is already there, and they are seen together by Pelham's manservant, Peterson. The double points out that Pelham is wearing an unusual tie, and when Peterson accepts that this means that Pelham is the imposter, Pelham has a mental breakdown. Again, it's just that whole the twist at the end type stuff that Hitchcock does so well. And it is a kind of a psychological horror rather than a visual graphic grab you type of horror. It's a realization of something that if you were in that situation, you'd have a breakdown too. Probably, because first off, they never really explain how he got a double or what this double is, or is he, and then when you see the twist, is he the double? You start questioning it yourself. So it's really well done.
Cool.
The Older Sister, which is season 1, episode 17, story by Lillian De La Torre, teleplay by Robert C. Dennis. This is based on the Lizzie Borden murders. It's set 1 year after Lizzie was acquitted for the murder of her parents. Ambitious reporter Nell Cutts barges into the home of the Borden sisters Lizzie and Emma in hopes of an exclusive interview. But Cutts' aggressive questioning causes Emma distress, and it turns out that Emma killed their parents, and Lizzie was merely trying to protect her. Dun, dun, dun. What happens now? And of course, there's many, many more episodes as well. There's over 300 episodes. It's one of the longest running drama series in history. So, there's a wonderful, wonderful stuff going on here. It's again, more of a suspense dark comedy, more so than, I guess, what people would call horror, but it is definitely one of the smartest written television shows of all time. I recommend it for 13 up, and I give it a 5-star rating. Again, John doesn't have a whole lot to add because he hasn't seen that stuff, but we're going to have to sit down and do an actual Alfred Hitchcock retrospective on that when you have caught up to speed.
Yeah.
Our next one is Are You Afraid of the Dark? Mm-hmm. And that aired on YTV in Canada and Nickelodeon in the United States from 1990 to 96. We're talking about the original Are You Afraid of the Dark? There were 2 additional reboots of the series later on. The series creators are DJ McHale and Ned Candell. There were 94 episodes total. The concept is that the show revolves around a group of teenagers who refer to themselves as the Midnight Society. Every episode at a secret location in the woods at night, one member tells a scary story to the group. The actual story, rather than the telling, is displayed to us as the audience. The story was shown between the group's arrival at the site and their departure, and each storyteller will begin their story by saying, submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society, which was kind of a, I don't know what's going on here. We're kind of missing stuff here. Let me see what I can do about that real quick. Submitted to the members of the Midnight Society, which was a throwback to Rod Serling submitted for your approval in Twilight Zone, which was, of course, the monologues that Rod Serling did in the Twilight Zone, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is a throwback to the monologues of Alfred Hitchcock in the Alfred Hitchcock Presents show. So we see this pattern of this format throughout all of them. Mark Andrew Smith says, I remember that show as a kid, but not the individual episodes, which is, he's talking about Are You Afraid of the Dark? Let me see what's going on here. I don't know what happened, but okay. Somehow one of my graphics got lost again when I was loading these. I don't know why, but that's okay. So let's go ahead and continue with this. My favorite episodes, rather, because I don't think you've watched this, have you, John?
Nope.
Yeah. Okay. Favorite episodes: Tale of the Twisted Claw, which was from season 1, episode 4. Two boys pull a prank on a witch the night before Halloween, and she in turn gives them a magical vulture claw charm with 3 wishes each, with the warning: be careful what you wish for, you may just get it. As the boys wish for things, things get worse and worse for them. Will they figure out how to get out of the trouble that they've caused? I don't want to get into all the different things they wish for, but it does get pretty gruesome for them. And ultimately they have to go, wish we didn't do anything wrong. And of course, everything gets reverted back. And she's like, gotcha. You kind of have to do that with a children's show, though. It's not, you can't get too far with the punishment of the evil side, I guess you could say. That's something that we do find a lot of in the horror. A next one, another favorite one of mine is Tale of the Prom Queen. which is season 1, episode 12, where two boys try to learn about the history of a ghost of a teenage girl who died while waiting for her date for the prom to show up. And they meet a girl who's a little bit odd. She's excited to help them, so they do research, and they find out that the reason that the boyfriend never showed is he never got the message to meet her there. So he was so distraught by her accidental death that he commits suicide. This shocks the girl, so the trio decide to do a seance and reach out to the boyfriend's spirit to try to find out what happened. And of course, the boyfriend's spirit returns, and, well, wouldn't you know, the girl that's helping them is actually the girl who died decades before. And the two get together and they go off into the afterlife. It's kind of a predictable ending, but it's really well told. And it's based off a real-life Chicago urban legend. Those are two of my favorites, but there's lots more. The show, I would say, was recommended for ages 12 and up, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Our next series is Tales from the Dark Side. Tell me you saw some Tales of the Dark Side.
Nope.
Okay. Syndication 84 to 88. Series creator is George A. Romero, who is someone we'll have to talk about horror directors and producers. We'll have to give him a whole dedicated episode at some point because he's just amazing. There were 89 episodes in total. The concept is it was an American anthology horror TV series wherein each episode was an individual standalone short story that often ended with a plot twist. Guess where we got that idea from? The series did span the genres of horror, science fiction, fantasy, and dark comedy. Some of the episodes of the series were written by or adapted from the works of famous authors, such as Stephen King's short stories Word Processor of the Gods and Sorry, Right Number, as well as works written by Frederick Pohl, Harlan Ellison, Clive Barker, Michael Bishop, Robert Bloch, John Cheever, Michael McDowell, Frederick Brown. There's 2 or 3 more I'm trying to think of. One of them, I can't remember her name. But anyway, they were all featured. And the strength of the writing for the show is what kept the series so successful. My favorite episodes, well, Word Processor of the Gods, season 1, episode 8, based on Stephen King's short story, where a man discovers his new word processor, which is a gift from his deceased nephew, is more powerful than he ever could have imagined because everything he types into it becomes real. A Case of the Stubborns, which is episode 9, the very next episode, based off a short story by Robert Bloch. Grandpa refuses to believe he is dead. And an early young Christian Slater and young Brett Spider, also known as Data from Star Trek The Next Generation, star in that. That was a cool episode. Jin No Chaser, which is the next episode of the season 10, which is based on Harlan Ellison's short story and guest stars Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as the genie. This is a dark comedy in which the couple finds a lamp which turns out to hold the genie, who's extremely annoyed at being trapped in the lamp for thousands of years. So he punishes them with plagues and problems, but the wife offers a simple solution to his problem. But anyway, I'm not going to get into the solution. It's a really interesting episode, though. And All a Clone by the Telephone, season 1, episode 11. An answering machine with a will of its own helps a television writer and then gradually begins to take over the writer's life. This features Harry Anderson of Night Court fame in the lead role of that episode as a television writer. And lastly, Ursa Minor, which is season 2, episode 10, based on a story by John Sladak and written by Ted Gershny. A little girl blames her new teddy bear for various pranks happening in her parents' house. They don't believe her until giant claw marks appear on the walls and lumbering sounds at night convince them. So the mother destroys the teddy bear but forgets one of the most basic rules of the wild. Harm the child and you must meet their mother. And again, there's many other episodes that are quite entertaining as well. Recommended for 13 and up. I give it a 5-star rating. What do you think of some of these episodes there I'm describing, John?
They sound very interesting. They sound like.
Why did you miss all this stuff when you were a kid? I know why, but John was very focused on his music.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. He was just focused on his music, and
Yeah, and what TV I did watch, of course, Saturday morning and weekday afternoon cartoons were my thing. I did watch The Incredible Hulk, of course. Love that show. But
that's more of the monsters a hero type storyline. Yeah.
But I generally stayed in the more family friendly area as a kid. That started to change.
Yeah. Our next one is Erie, Indiana. Aired on NBC 91 and 92. Series creators are Jose Rivera and Carl Schaefer. There were only 19 episodes. And this series revolves around Marshall Teller, a teenager whose family moves to the desolate town of Erie, Indiana, population 16,661. Why is it 5,000 or 5 members short of 666 at the end? Or is it there's 666 in the middle and the ones mean something else? We don't know. While moving into his new home, he meets Simon Holmes, one of the few normal people in Erie. Together, they are faced with bizarre scenarios, which include discovering a sinister group of intelligent dogs that are planning to take over the world, confront numerous urban legends such as Bigfoot, and they have other adventures. Now, I don't know if you saw it. I didn't see it when it first ran because I was in college and I didn't have TV in college. I watched it in syndication later on. And I didn't see all the episodes. So my grading is probably a little bit off on this one. I don't know. But we'll talk a little bit more about what I've seen. Have you seen any of this show?
No.
No. Okay.
I promise, folks, we will get to stuff I have seen in a few moments.
Okay. In fact, we might even just say, what have you seen? Anyway, the series will be canceled at NBC and moved over to Fox in 1993, which aired one episode that NBC never aired, and then re-aired the rest of the part of their Saturday morning lineup and syndication. That's why I thought you saw this, because you just said you watch Saturday morning TV.
Well, I should have been specific and said Saturday morning cartoons.
But anyway, the other reason that this show is kind of weird is the last 6 episodes were reformatted and changed the concept so it had a central villain, Dash X, who got introduced. And it turned the show into a really campy, tongue-in-cheek, fourth-wall-breaking sequence of events depicting Dash X's attempts to take over as star of the show, and I think that's what really ruined the show. It certainly ruined it for me. Best episode was episode 7, Heart on a Chain, where Marshall and a classmate, Devin, played by Corey Danziger, fall for the new girl, Melanie Monroe, played by Danielle Harris, who needs a heart transplant. When Devin dies in a gruesome accident, Melanie receives his heart, and her personality changes almost overnight. Is Melanie acting out because she feels guilty over Devin's death, or does Devin's spirit live on in his in the transplanted heart in her body? It's not really clear on either. It could be either or. And it's kind of a weird thing because the scenes are like when he's with her after the heart transplant, he's trying to console her and be affectionate. She kind of like freaks out because she's like, oh, like I'm a guy now in the body, type thing. It was kind of a weird thing, but that's my favorite episode overall for that. And I give it a 3 out of 5. 3 out of 5. Recommended for 12 and up. So that being said, we have not talked about something you've seen. What have you seen that you want to talk about?
Okay. Well, thanks to Netflix, I am catching up on the Twilight Zone.
Okay, we'll get to that in a little bit later.
Okay.
What else you got?
All right. So I'm going to talk about some movies because there are some some horror themed movies that I've seen. And the first one, in keeping with kind of the thing of the theme of a swamp thing, is we're going to go with Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Okay. What year was that?
1954.
Hold on. I think I got that in the movie section. Let me check real quick. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
It was 1954.
All right.
And actually, this was actually not my introduction to the Gill Man. My introduction to the Gill Man was with this movie's sequel, Revenge of the Creature, because one time when I was a kid, they broadcast Revenge of the Creature on television, and they made this big to do about how they were going to broadcast it in 3D. And so, like, me and like all the kids I knew, like, I'd never seen a 3D movie before in my life, and all I knew was that you had to have these weird glasses. And I think like you could get the 3D glasses at like 7-Eleven or some like convenience or drugstore. Of course, this was not the sophisticated 3D glasses we have today. These were the, red and blue tinted cardboard cutout, practically 3D.
Right.
But so of course we were all excited, and we watched the film on TV, and of course the 3D effect doesn't work because obviously there were no such things as 3D flat screen TVs back then. But I liked the movie, and years later, when I was living on my own, and I finally decided to start trying to catch up on things I had not seen as a child. I'll say Blockbuster Video became my friend, and and I rented Creature from the Black Lagoon, and I loved it.
Did you rent it in the original black and white, or did you watch it in the colorized version?
No, I read original black and white.
Okay.
Um,
People should know that this film was filmed originally in black and white, and if you watch it in color, because there is a colorized version, it's not as good as the black and white because they lose some of the cinematography dynamics of light and shadow when they put the color.
Yes, and that is essential for this movie. Like, and one of the things I liked about it, I mean, I think it's beautifully photographed, and trust me, the Blu-ray completely does it justice.
Mm-hmm.
But there's the now iconic scene of where Julia Adams' character is taking a swim, and you see the creature swimming underneath her.
Mm-hmm.
And these
go on. I'll go ahead.
These you have all these shafts of sunlight coming in, and it's just a beautiful sequence, I thought.
Yeah, a very influential one on filmmaking for another horror film, Jaws.
Yes.
And the movie poster. That scene that we see with the shark coming up with the woman swimming is based off of that sequence in Creature of the Black Lagoon. And a lot of people don't make that connection for some reason, but it's there. That's why when you mentioned that, I was like, yes, because we're not going to talk about Jaws tonight. The reason we're not talking about Jaws, even though Jaws is an amazing movie and we do love it.
And I have seen it.
Yep. We're going to talk about kind of like the water monster based, like Jaws, Orca, Deep Blue Sea, all those types as a theme later on in the year. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's why Jaws is not on our episode tonight, but he is one of our favorites as well. So Creature of the Black Lagoon is, who directed that?
Jack Arnold.
Okay. What do you know about Jack, if anything?
I don't know much. I know he directed a Peter Sellers movie called The Mouse That Roared. I know that. I don't know much about him personally.
Well, I just wondered what other stuff you knew about him, because I have seen the movie. I like the movie. I've got the Art Adams adaptation in the comics from Dark Horse.
Yep.
But I've not the classic stuff from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. I've never really been enough of a cinemaphile to really know that stuff, and that's
let me give you a recommendation. Jack Arnold also directed a movie called The Incredible Shrinking Man.
I've seen that one. Okay.
Okay. It's like that is a good movie. And anybody who hasn't seen The Incredible Shrinking Man, I highly recommend it.
Mark Andrew Smith says, watch Underwater if you didn't see it in that genre. I did watch a lot of the underwater 80s movies this fall that I missed growing up. Underwater. Is that the new film with Kristen Stewart? Mark, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either.
I think that's what he's talking about. And I do plan on seeing it at some point. I just haven't seen it yet. So if that is what you're referring to, confirm or deny, or give us a little more info on that, Mark. We're going to get back to the movies a little bit later, because we got a lot of movies to talk about tonight.
Yeah, and of course,
that is the thing he's talking about, Underwater. Okay.
And of course, Creature from the Black Lagoon. I mean, you got to love the Gill Man. Like, I think
Who did the special effects on the Gill Man?
Well,
come on.
I heard that Bud Westmore did it, although I've heard people say that he actually didn't design the suit. I forget who did. I know that Rico Browning and Ben Chapman actually performed the Gill Man. Rico Browning was a champion swimmer, so he did the underwater stuff, and Ben Chapman did the on land stuff.
Right. Well, I'm just curious. I mean, because, again, I love the movie, watching it, but I really wasn't a person that was that steeped in the history of it, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? The designer was actually Millicent Patrick.
Yes.
And she was a Disney animator.
I had forgotten about that.
And of course, this is the 50s. Women get downplayed, they get blown off, and Bud Westmore actually took credit for it. And he received sole credit for over half a century. But another person created the bodysuit, and that was Jack Kevin. And he was a person who made prosthetics for amputees during World War II. That's the one who actually created the bodysuit, and Chris Mueller Jeweler sculpted the head. But the design was actually by Millicent Patrick and not Bud Westmore. And I just thought that was an interesting point. And I thought you'd know, because one, you're a huge Disney nut.
Yeah.
And that is just such a key, interesting point, that this was actually designed by a woman. And when you start looking at this character, it's a Gill Man, but there ain't no man parts. Which, in a way, that's kind of interesting, but it makes sense too, because it is an amphibious creature. Which you kind of wonder what's going on. How did they, it's. I've always wondered about that. You wonder what's in those suckers in his hands. But anyway, yeah, I do love that character. I wish Tracy were here to talk a little bit more about it.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know who Tracy is, Tracy's our mutual friend, Tracy Hollingsworth, who is a huge creature fanatic. And he could probably school both of us 10 times.
Oh, I'm sure.
On this stuff. So, but yeah, definitely, you'd probably give it a what, 4.5 to 5?
Yeah.
Okay, I give it a 4.5. There were a few. There are points in the movie I think are a little slow for me. Is that?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Okay. Wolfman's got nards for Monster Squad. Okay, Mark. We'll talk about the Wolfman a little bit later in the show. Let's get back to the TV shows, if you don't mind, though.
All right.
Back to them. We will definitely revisit some more movies, though. The next TV show was Friday the 13th, the series, which aired from 87 to 90, 72 episodes. The concept was created by producer Mank Francuso Jr. It follows Mickey and Ryan, who are cousins and newly inherited owners of an antique store, which they learn is cursed from occult expert Jack Marshak only after they have given away all of their cursed antiques. Because they didn't really want to hold the store. They just wanted to get rid of it and, do. So the trio have to work together and try to recover all these cursed antiques and put them back into the safety of the shop's vault. Originally, this series was to be entitled The 13th Hour, but Mancuso Jr. thought that this would turn away viewers and instead took the name Friday the 13th to deliberately draw in audiences. Despite this title, the series has no connections whatsoever to the film franchise, though there were unsubstantiated rumors at one point that Jason's hockey mask would be one of the antiques, possibly for the series finale. I recommend it for ages 14 and up, 4 stars. Main reason I liked this show was the character, the actress who plays Mickey, Louise Roby.
I'm going to go refill my water glass, but I'll be right back.
Yeah, that's fine. For those of you who don't know, Louise Roby was actress and musician, best known for the role on this series, and she ended up marrying royalty at some point, and had a son who's now a prince or a duke or something like that, which I thought was really interesting. Little interesting tidbit fact. But that was one of the reasons why I watched that particular show, was because I kind of had a crush on her. I got to admit. The final season was canceled abruptly, 6 issues short, kind of like what happened with Swamp Thing, without any chance for the writers or crew to bring the series to closure. This was a first-run syndication show, which means it was one of the most successful of its time. That means it was never put in through a normal network. It was always run by non-network stations, and usually late at night stuff. And this was, at the time it was airing, it was the second highest rated syndicated show behind only Star Trek The Next Generation. Ironically, the show aired in syndication right after Next Gen. When I first discovered it, when I was living in Michigan, we had a CBS affiliate that was sort of a pseudo CBS affiliate. They ran some CBS and some syndication, and they had it on at like 1 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night, Sunday morning, right after Next Gen. So that's when I got to see it. And I think that kind of happened a lot of places. Wherever they aired Next Gen, it packaged it Friday the 13th after it somehow. At least that's what I've heard. My favorite episodes are Dr. Jack, which is season 1, episode 7. A series of slashings leads the group to a surgeon who loves the limelight. To complicate matters, a woman seeks revenge on the doctor for her daughter's murder. Now, the object is a scalpel that he uses. and you have to kill someone with the scalpel so you can perform the surgery successfully with the scalpel. It's like, yeah, and that's kind of a theme with this show. You sacrifice someone to get what you want the object to do for you. But it kind of has a sort of a mix of the Jack the Ripper motif as well. So that's why it's called Dr. Jack and stuff. But it's a really interesting episode. My next, again, you say this is a scalpel that they believed belonged to Jack the Ripper, and it only guarantees successful surgery after it's used to kill, like I said. My next favorite, this is actually my overall favorite, is Tales of the Undead, season 1, episode 10. And it's because it's about comics. Ryan witnesses an attack by a character from his favorite comic book. To learn more, Ryan tracks down the comic's creator, who's a bitter man, played by Ray Walston, who has a vendetta against his former business partners who basically screwed him out of the rights to the comic. It's very much a kind of a play on what happened with Siegel and Schuster with Superman. The Cursed Antique is a comic book that transforms the owner into the character, which is a killer robot. The robot itself in the comic isn't necessarily a killer, but you get the idea. And I really did like that. Was like my first episode I actually saw of the series, so that was like really a way to get me interested right off the bat. Scarlet Cinema, which is season 2, episode 16, the 42nd episode overall. A film student with a thing for werewolf films uses a cursed movie camera to bring the beast to life and eventually to become a werewolf himself. The Cursed Antique is the movie camera, of course. It also grants wishes after the character kills 3 people. What do you think of that, John?
That sounds interesting. That does sound interesting.
Okay. I knew you hadn't seen it. You probably haven't seen She-Wolf of London either, have you?
No.
Okay. Well, here's our werewolf thing then, or one of ours talks about werewolf. It's She-Wolf of London, also known as Love and Curses, which aired in 90 and 91. This was a syndicated series. The creator Tom McLaughlin and Nick Garris. There was only 20 episodes. The concept is American graduate student Randy Wallace travels to Britain to study mythology with Professor Ian Matheson. She arrives expecting a stodgy old academic, but Ian is a young stud type guy. He's not really, but he's a decent looking enough fellow for his age. I think he's a little bit older for her, but whatever. The two are immediately attracted to one another anyway. Their attraction increases, but a complication quickly arises when Randy spends the night out on the moors and gets attacked and bitten by a werewolf. She survives what the local hospital thinks was an attack by a large rabid wolf, but she insists that it was not a true wolf, but instead something supernatural, and she seeks Ian's help. For the rest of the series, the two of them are now trying to figure out a cure for her condition, and they investigate supernatural phenomena together while they're trying to find a cure for her lycanthropy. And he basically becomes her keeper during her transformations to the wolf. Randy's curse draws the attentions of various supernatural entities in the area. Another werewolf, spirit possession, a succubus, a possessed bookstore, a bogeyman, an evil carnival, a Guy Fawkes spirit, a killer horseman, and zombies, among their varied opposition, I guess you could say. The show's budget dropped by about 40% after season 1, and the show was moved from the UK to film in Los Angeles to cut for budgetary reasons. And they used a story that, in the storyline, they said Ian was now a TV host for a paranormal TV show because he sold one of his books and it made him an international star. But when they moved to California, they lost almost all the show's charms, and it lasted only 6 more episodes in season 2. It's recommended for ages 16 and up, recommended for 3 out of 5 stars. Like Friday the 13th, I watched it for Louise Roby and Friday the 13th mostly. I watched She-Wolf of London for the actress who played Randy, Kate Hodge, who would later go on to. She was also in Leatherface in that film, and she was in later in the show Level 9. So, these women were in their 20s, and I was like, they were probably in their mid 20s. I was like 17, 18. So they're probably, kind of like, yeah, that's what I want to find when I grow up. Type women. But I really did enjoy the first season while they were still in London, UK area. It felt very well done at that point. But when they moved it over to Los Angeles, it lost every charm it had, unfortunately. It did get collected on the Sci-Fi Channel when it first aired, when Sci-Fi was first launching. They did re-air all the series in syndication under well, they called it She-Wolf of London initially, but then they changed it over to the Love and Curses title. Next TV show, Tales from the Crypt. You got to tell me you've seen some Tales from the Crypt.
I have.
Okay.
Way back when I was still living with my parents, and they had HBO, so I did see some episodes. I don't like, the only thing I remember about the show is the Crypt Keeper himself.
That's understandable. But
Yeah.
the creator was Stephen Dodd, based from the comics published by William Gaines. The number of episodes were 93. This aired from 89 to 96. And again, this is the theme that does very well for horror television shows. Like do an anthology series, in each episode being its own separate tale, with a person introducing and giving a monologue both before and after the story. This anthology adapted the stories that were the classic EC Comics series Tales from the Crypt, or their sister EC Comics such as The Haunt of Fear, The Vault of Horror, Crime Suspense Stories, Shock Suspense Stories, and Two-Fisted Tales. This was produced and originally aired on HBO, as John alluded to, which at the time was a premium cable television channel. And as such, remember this was the late 80s, it had more freedom to do more risque stuff, no censorship issues. So there was a lot of content that would not have appeared in most television series up to that time in the late 80s, early 90s. Graphic violence, profanity, sexual activity, and nudity included. It's definitely R-rated material. The series is subsequently edited for such content when broadcast in syndication or on basic cable later on. But if you want to watch the actual uncensored versions, you need to probably get the DVDs if you can. But this series was a landmark for both bringing awareness to the original comics from the 50s, but it was a watershed series that pushed television boundaries as well in its time. And that's why I think it's such an important series, not just in terms of horror, horror TV shows, but television as a whole, because it really did push the violence level, the profanity level, all these things that I won't say that it served the purposes of the story. It wasn't always, I would not say it was ever gratuitous, if that makes sense.
Yes.
But again, we're talking about the late 80s. There was a different culture in America. We were, I don't know, we were still under the pretense of the Comics Code Authority. We're still under McCarthyism a little bit in the 80s under Reagan. So, we didn't really have that to break out of that until a few years later in the 90s. Let's see if you recognize any of these episodes. My favorite episodes are The Reluctant Vampire, which is season 3, episode 7, based on the story originally from The Vault of Horror number 20. Malcolm McDowell stars as a vampire with morals. So instead of killing people to feed, he works in a blood bank and steals blood to feed on. But his boss is catching on, and they're losing money because of him taking the blood, so they're going to go out of business. And also there's a co-worker who's kind of into him, So he has to keep, things on a down low, and he has to turn to attacking criminals to feed upon, all while trying to avoid detection for who he is. Does that episode sound familiar to you?
No.
Okay. How about The Thing from the Grave, which is season 2, episode 6, based from Tales from the Crypt 22. Stacy, played by Terry Hatcher, who's a supermodel, and her photographer, Devlin, played by Kyle Secor, fall in love. When Stacy's abusive fiance, Mitch, played by Miguel Ferrer, learns of their affair, he sets out to kill Devlin. However, Mitch learns that he gets that really nasty surprise. His love proves to be quite strong, even in the face of death itself. Does that sound familiar? Maybe? No? Okay. Darn. The last one, I think, is my favorites. Might have one more. Let me check. No, that is my last favorite one. Is Doctor of Horror, which was season 6, episode 12, based off of the story from Vault of Horror number 13, starring Hank Azaria as Richard and Charlie, played by Travis Tritt, the country singer, who are 2 bumbling security guards who work in a morgue, and they discover mad scientist Dr. Orloff, played by Austin Pendleton, as he's attempting to steal a corpse. Dr. Orloff explains to the guards that he believes souls can be extracted from the recently deceased, and he's been stealing bodies in his quest to obtain a soul, basically. After Orloff pays the 2 guards a large sum of money to steal and later dump corpses for him, Charlie begins to have doubts about what they're doing and whether it's right or not, which prompts Richard to decide that Charlie must have quite a soul himself. What does that mean? I'll let you figure it out. But there's other episodes as well, but those are the 3 that came to my mind immediately. I had to look them up, but those are the ones I remembered. We'll have to revisit this series as a whole in the future. Ages 16 and up, rated 5 stars. Again, you really remember it more for the monologues before and after the show.
Right.
And a lot of people do that because it was really well done. And there's episodes in there where they have, like, there was an episode directed by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Arnold's introducing it with the Crypt Keeper. There's an episode where Whoopi Goldberg plays a character in the story, and at the end of the story, she appears with the Crypt Keeper. So there's little things like that. That's what people tend to remember the most.
But I also remember, and I think I told you about this. Well, I did tell you about this. But Tales from the Crypt was spun off into a Saturday morning cartoon.
Yes.
Called Tales from the Crypt Keeper.
Right.
And again, this is like the late 80s, early 90s when you had all these.
Actually, 93, 94.
But you had all these. You had like R-rated properties like RoboCop and Rambo becoming animated cartoons. So this one followed suit, and for what it was, I mean, it certainly wasn't the greatest cartoon ever made, but for what it was, and
yeah, they couldn't do an adult version for Saturday morning cartoon.
Right.
If HBO had done Tales from the Crypt Keeper as an animated series to go along with Spawn's HBO,
so it would have been a whole different series than what we got.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean, like you say, for what that was, that was kind of like the more of a tongue-in-cheek, lighthearted version of Tales from the Crypt, I guess you could say, more so. And I think, whereas both the original comics from EC and the live action have the sardonic wit and dark comedy elements to it.
But at least they got John Kassir to come back and do the Crypt Keeper's voice, because, I mean, who else were you going to get?
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Okay, let's see what else we got. Now we can talk about the Twilight Zone.
Okay.
The Twilight Zone aired from 1959 to 1964. Creator Rod Serling, number of episodes 156. Again, this is an anthology series of standalone episodic stories, with each episode presenting a standalone story in which characters find themselves dealing with often disturbing or unusual events, an experience described as entering the Twilight Zone, often with a surprise ending and a moral element to the concept or storyline. Some people say it's predominantly a science fiction story, but the show's paranormal and Kafkaesque events leans the show towards fantasy and horror, in my opinion. The phrase Twilight Zone, inspired by the series, is used to describe surreal experiences. The series features both established stars and younger actors who would then become much better known later on. Serling served as executive producer and the head writer. He wrote or co-wrote 92 of the show's 156 episodes. Of course, he was also the show's host and narrator, delivering the monologues beginning and end of each episode after the Alfred Hitchcock Presents model. Serling's opening and closing narrations usually summarize the episode's events, encapsulating how and why the main characters entered the Twilight Zone. And this series is considered by many to be the greatest dramatic television series ever produced. Well, with that, I think we already know it's a 5-star.
Yeah.
The show would receive multiple revivals after Rod Serling's death in 1975, notably in 85, 2002, and 2019, respectively. It also had a movie, but nothing and nobody has ever come close to matching the Serling version.
Yep.
Favorite episodes? Well, crap. Where do we begin?
I know.
Serling's favorite, and one of mine, and I probably use one of yours as well, is Time Enough is at Last, which is season 1, episode 8. This is the episode adapted from a short story written by Lynn Venable under the pen name of Marilyn Venable. And it appeared originally in the January 53 edition of the science fiction magazine If, Worlds of Science Fiction, about 7 years before the television episode first aired. This is the story where Burgess Meredith stars as a man who seeks salvation in the rubble of a ruined world, who loves books and yet is surrounded by those who prevent him from reading them. And they have a nuclear event, I guess you could call it, and he survives because he was reading in the bank vault. And he comes out of the bank vault, everybody's dead and nobody's around, and he's like, oh, well, okay, if there's nobody around here, at least I can at least have freedom to read. And he stumbles on the rubble, and his glasses fall off and they shatter. And he can't read without his glasses because he's one of those thick Coke bottle guys. And so now he has nobody around, and there's nobody to fix his glasses. He can't read. He has it's just so that's Rod Serling's favorite episode. What do you think of that?
I definitely like that one. I don't know if you have this one on your list. One of my favorite episodes is The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street.
I was saving it for you to talk about that one.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So it's.
Do you have the thing called up on your screen? The history of it.
Mm-hmm. So it's. Hold on, I'm getting it.
Yeah, because you mentioned it, and I was like, yeah, you're gonna have to have that one.
So again, it's it takes place on suburban Main Street, could be any town USA, and basically 1960s America, and all of a sudden the residents of Maple Street, they feel something like a tremor, and they hear a loud noise, and one of the characters thinks it could be a meteorite, and one of the young kids tells them this science fiction story he read about an alien invasion where they were first sent among humans to live with them in disguise, and as things progress, paranoia sets in,
Right.
and before you know it, everybody's pointing the finger at everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, I shouldn't reveal the very end of the episode, but it's I mean, it's about paranoia and what happens when mob mentality sets in, and how humans lose their reasoning and they just go for everybody's throat. And I remember when I finished watching the episode, it's like, my God, we're living this episode right now.
Well,
I mean,
you gotta remember, we're not just reliving it now. We were living it back then.
Yeah,
I
mean, we've never
1960.
we've really never stopped living it.
Right. This episode aired originally in March of 1960. It was season 1, episode 22. And 1960s, we're talking in 1960s, we're talking about not just McCarthyism was going on strong in the U.S. We had issues with the black rights movements. We had issues going on with Korea and leading into Vietnam, and that soon to come about. So there was a lot of stuff in our culture at that time where we did not. There was a surface of everything's cool, but underneath there were always tensions and questions of what we trusted or did not trust. And that's part of what this is about. As John says, there's a meteorite that they think it's a meteorite. Part of what causes the paranoia is certain things are going around in the town, like power goes out and they can't explain it.
Yes.
And they're like, well, there's going to be power on another street. We'll go to the other street. And the kids are like, no, don't go over there. Don't go over there. Because they're like, the kids are afraid that the aliens or whatever, their street's the only one that's safe. Don't go on the other street. You'll get taken or whatever. And there's an interesting dynamic between what the kids reflect and what the adults are reflecting as well. Because even though the kids are more innocent, they have what I call common sense awareness of what, as we get older, we lose our common sense. we get into a routine of what society expects of us, and a lot of times there just isn't much common sense in society. So I think that I think children see things not necessarily black and white, just see things that for us we should be seeing, but we lose it as we're more worried about adult things, I guess you could say. But yes, definitely that's a good episode to talk about, and thank you for mentioning that one. Another episode that we like is Eye of the Beholder, which is also titled The Private World of Darkness, which was season 2, episode 6. This is the episode where the woman has undergone multiple plastic surgeries to correct her so-called ugliness. And then when they take the wrappings off her face, the doctor declares a failure. And what we see as the audience seems to be an attractive woman, but then we're shown everyone else who are these ugly, pig-like faces with drooping features, large, thick brows, sunken eyes, swollen, twisted lips, wrinkled noses, look like pig snouts, like the big faces. Yeah, that's another one of my favorites because it's always First off, the special effects on those makeups on that particular episode were all amazing for the time, especially. But just, the idea of, okay, this woman who's supposed to, has gone through 11 plastic surgeries and her face looks like that, and they're trying to get it to look like that. What? And what they do is, of course, they have another person who's normal looking to us, take her with her, and they go off to another part of society that's shunned from the rest of the world. That's all messed up. But it's basically a play though of how we treat people by appearance.
I'll say what one thing.
Mark Smith says, "I love the Howling Man," where the guy says he caught the devil. Okay, let me check that one up. The name sounds familiar, but
well, for me, like one of the things that separates the original Twilight Zone from all the others, well, one of many things is not just the quality of the writing, the directing, the acting, the fact that it was shot in black and white and like beautifully shot in black and white, like that just adds so much to this show.
Well, that's a product of the times, though. That was 1959. They didn't really have color TV yet.
Well,
that I'm aware of. Maybe I'm wrong.
They did it, or I should say they were starting to have color TV.
No, they had color TV as early as 39, apparently. But by 53, they had, there was color TV then. Okay, I was just thinking that it came out a little bit later. That's my fault. Okay, color TVs first came out in 54. So, yes, the fact that it was done in black and white, that's an interesting choice then.
Now granted, color TV didn't really take off until Walt Disney came along with The Wonderful World of Color, and that's when color TV really started to skyrocket. But just the black and white is just adds so much that I don't think you lose in all the other versions of the Twilight Zone that they're in color.
It could be. That could be. Mark said he loves the episode "The Howling Man," and yes, that is the title of the episode. Mark, that is season 2, episode 5, written by Charles Beaumont, based on the short story by the same author, and it aired in November of 1960. And it's about an American soldier or American traveling through post-World War I, Central Europe, around 1925, 1926. He gets lost in a storm, and he sees a building and walks towards it, and it turns out to be a castle, which is now the home of an order of monks, brothers, whatever, near the village of Schwarzkopf. And the monk says they don't allow visitors. And he hears a wolf-like howl coming from somewhere in the castle. And when Ellington asks him about this howl, the monk tells him it's merely the wind. And so he takes Ellington to meet the head of the monk order. And when Ellington explains the only reason he's here at the castle is to escape the storm and maybe obtain some food, Brother Jerome announces that there's no help to be had here and that Ellington must immediately leave. Ellington turns to leave, but he only gets as far as the door before he collapses. When he awakens, he is inside the castle, and again he hears the howling. He investigates and finds a man in a cell. The man claims to be a prisoner of an insane religious order, locked up because he kissed his sweetheart in public and beaten by Brother Jerome using the staff that he wields. Ellington is seen talking to the prisoner and then forcibly brought back to Brother Jerome. And when an explanation is not forthcoming about the man in the cell, Ellington says he will leave, but also threatens to go to the police. Brother Jerome, realizing that Ellington's threat might set the prisoner free, then reveals the truth. The prisoner is not a man, but rather the devil himself, and can only be contained by the so-called staff of truth, which is what the staff that Brother Jerome wields. The devil had come to the village shortly after World War I to corrupt it, but Jerome had recognized him for what he was and used the staff to imprison him. These actions have given the world 5 years of relative peace, with only the evils created by mankind itself. Convinced that Brother Jerome is insane, and as well as the other monks, Ellington pretends to believe this incredible story, but he's not fooled, and Jerome assigns another brother to guard him. Anyway, Ellington leaves, but he kind of turns back and he frees the prisoner. And of course, as the guy gets out of his cell, he takes on more and more of the appearance of the devil, and then he disappears in a plume of smoke. And that's basically the story. And then it leads up that Ellington has been telling this story to a maid. And ever since then, he's been hunting the devil to atone for his mistake through World War II, through the Korean War, and the development of nuclear weapons. He has finally succeeded. He has locked the devil in a closet, barbed by a staff similar to the one Brother Jerome had used, and he intends to return him to the castle and to Brother Jerome. So he warns the skeptical housekeeper not to remove the staff under any circumstances. And of course, as Ellington leaves, the maid hears a howl from behind the door, and in her curiosity removes the staff, and the door slowly opens, and that's how the episode ends. That's a really cool episode too. So, that's definitely a worthy episode to talk about as well. But there's so many to talk about. Like we could talk about the Twilight Zone for weeks on end, really.
Yes.
So, and again, I kind of agree with you about the point you made about the color, but I just think the writing was never as good.
That's true.
First off, Rod Serling was an amazing writer, but he also had Robert Bloch, he had Harlan Ellison, he had all these amazing writers of that era. And the generations that have come up since, it's all about visual shock and not about storytelling. It's always, what kind of visual twist can we do it? And can we do something that when the visual twist comes, it's like thumping the audience over the head with the obviousness of it. I think that's where the big flaw comes in with some of the more recent versions of that. I have not seen the most recent one that was on CBS All Access.
Yeah, with Jordan Peele.
Yeah, Jordan Peele, but I don't like I'm not really fond of any of Jordan Peele's stuff, so I'm not expecting to care one way or the other about that. I know people are like, "What, you don't like Get Out? You don't like it?" They're okay for what they are in our times today. But they don't have the same power as Serling or Hitchcock to me. So anyway, what else we got? Speaking of Rod Serling, we got one more thing here. Is Night Gallery, which after the Twilight Zone was ended, from 70 to 73, he did 43 episodes, but there's technically 93 stories. There was usually two to three episodes, 2 stories per episode, so there's 93 stories presented. And again, this is the same as Twilight Zone. Serling now does his monologues in a dark and spooky art gallery, and the audience sees a painting that has something to do with the stories before we get into the story. A lot of people say it's not as good as Twilight Zone. But Serling was nearing the end of his life at that point. He was suffering. He was a smoker, heavy smoker. I think everybody can remember that. He's almost always had a cigarette in his hand. Even when he was, anytime he wasn't on Twilight Zone, he was on camera, he had a cigarette in his hand. And even in some episodes of Twilight Zone, you see him smoking. But anyway, he had a series of heart attacks in 73, back to back to back. And he died at the age of 50. And that was part of why that one ended so short comparative to the other. My favorite episodes are The Little Black Bag, which is season 1, episode 2, second story, written by Rod Serling, based on a short story by C.M. Kornbluth, featuring Burgess Meredith as a disgraced doctor in 1971 who stumbles across a medical bag from the year 2098. You can imagine what that does. Another early episode that, while it's not necessarily a favorite of mine, is a very historically significant one in terms of Hollywood history. Steven Spielberg's first professional job as a director was on the pilot episode of this series. He does the second story, Eyes, where a blind woman, Joan Crawford, portrayed by Joan Crawford, undergoes an operation that gives her 12 hours to see. And then I guess she goes blind again. That's why it's not one of my favorite episodes. I was like, I never quite got the idea of, okay, you're going to cure the person of blindness, but only for 12 hours. Yeah, that was why I was never, that's why that's one. It's not really one of my favorites, but that was Spielberg's first directorial work. And he also did 2 other episodes of Night Gallery as a director. So that was a little interesting little footnote for his career. And let's see. My favorite probably is this one, Class of 99, which is season 2, episode 6, written by Rod Serling and features Vincent Price as the lead role. In the year 1999, a graduating class takes a rather strange psychological final exam from a professor that explores their understanding of social issues, racism, sexism, socioeconomic status, and they are graded on the spot. The scenarios and actions of the students are disturbing on multiple levels, but yet logical in other ways. I don't want to give the spoiler because if I give it to you, it'll ruin it. You have to watch this. You can watch it on NBC.com for free. All you got to do is look up Night Gallery, Class of 99. You can watch it for free. It's just wild. I mean, I can give you some of it. He asks a person about, you and another person in the classroom are both up for the same job, and why would this, who is the person that it is, and why would you think that they're taking their job from you? And he asks a white guy, and there's another black guy, and there's a black guy in the room. He says the black guy's the problem, which is the typical racial thing that we all know about. He goes, well, what would you do about that? Well, if I think about, no, not what would you think? What is your initial reaction? Well, I want to smack him, slap him. Well, go ahead and do it then. So the guy walks down to the black guy. The black guy stands up, and they face each other, and he smacks the living hell out of the guy. I mean, he hits him so hard that you'd think that. I mean, this is done in the 70s, so it's just a quick jerk to the left. But if they did it today, he'd probably be falling completely over to the side, over the chairs or something. So the black guy takes it, comes back, and he goes, okay, what was your reaction to that? Well, he's a racist and this, that, he goes, okay, and what do you want? I want, to, justice and equality. He goes, okay, hit him. So the black guy smacks him right back. Now, How do you both feel about it? We're both satisfied. That's adequate. Okay. And they go back to their respective places and sit down. That's weird, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's just this keeps escalating and escalating to a certain point, and it gets to a point where someone's going to get killed. And I don't want to say what happens or why it doesn't happen, but that's where the reveal comes in. And then when you see the reveal, it gives you a completely different thing of what's going on. It's mind blowing to me. I was like, I remembered that when I was like, do I remember that one right? So that was one of my favorites on that one. The show is darker than Twilight Zone to me. It's more cynical as well. So again, 13 and up, rating 5 stars. Anything with anything Rod Serling does is amazing. Mark Andrew Smith says Black Mirror may be the closest modern successor. I can't speak to that because I've heard of it, but I've never seen it. I don't even know where you'd find it. So you're probably the same way. You probably don't know where to get it either, right?
I don't.
Yeah. Is that on Netflix or a Hulu or
I don't know.
I'm asking Mark. But that is our TV shows. Let's get back to the movies. You have quite a few more than just the Creature of the Black Lagoon. So go ahead.
All right. Gosh, which one should I start with?
Whichever one you want. He says he thinks it's on Netflix. Yeah. Okay. I'll look that up real quick. Yeah, Netflix is where it started on Channel 4 in the UK, and then Netflix purchased it in 2015. So, all right.
So we're going to go with an absolute classic here, and another in the Universal monster cycle, and that is The Invisible Man.
Yes, that's a good one. Claude Rains.
Yeah. And again, this was when I first saw during my Blockbuster video renting days. And I'll tell you what I love about, well, several things I love about this. One, like it's very witty. Like I wasn't like really expecting it, but you know, it does the funny stuff very well, while not shying away from the fact that this man, as his invisibility serum affects him, is doing some terrible things.
Right.
But you know, like it's really enjoyable to see at least at first, the fun he has messing with the people when he turns invisible. And you know, and of course, every time the innkeeper's wife goes into hysterics, like that's hilarious. Like there's one point, like he steals somebody's bicycle, and it's like, you know, okay, here's your bike, do what you want with it, you know, like he throws it back at him. But it's just like it's very witty. Another thing I loved about it is, like, you know, nowadays, you know, we've become so.
Nowadays, every time they do an Invisible Man, it's a rape fest.
Yes.
And that is not in the original. I remember. There's nothing even remotely. Am I misremembering?
I don't believe there was.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, in the movie, no, there's no rape in the movie.
There's nothing. There's no accostation of a woman or anything in the Claude Rains version that I remember. And
Like
yet, and like I said, every modern, there's got to be some, it's like, why? That I think that's one of the reasons why the classic is so much better.
Of course, in this movie, his love interest is played by future Titanic star Gloria Stewart. But another thing I love about this movie is, nowadays, special effects just really aren't that special anymore because they've become so
CGI
in place, and we become sort of desensitized to them. But
yeah, and whereas this is so far back, you go, how did they do that?
This is from a time when the special effects served the story; they didn't become the story. And I mean, you look at this movie and they still have that wonder, like you said, you wonder how did they do that? And they're especially for the time, they were extremely well done, and they still hold up.
Yeah, that's the point. You're talking about a film that was made, what, in 33?
33.
And that, if you were to show that to a kid today, and you said this film was made in 1933, and there's no computers, their mind would be like, huh? How'd they do that? And I think that's what drove a lot of the horror and special effects guys for decades. They wanted to learn how that was done. It was magic to movies. And, that was something we were talking about last night when I had Tony McMillan as our guest. We were talking about his graphic novel Serious Creatures, which is about a teenage special effects guy in the 70s and 80s. And that was like the last era of it. We got into computers and started getting into computer graphics in the late 80s, early 90s. We started losing that. So,
and of course, we got to mention Claude Rains.
Yes.
And this was his debut. This was, here's the definition of irony. It's his debut film, and he plays a guy you don't even see until the final seconds of the film. But I mean, he had that voice, and he just.
Well, it's not just the voice. I mean, it's about, how do I put this? There's a presence, a gravitas to him, at least in this role, that he brings to that role, that he looked at it as like, well, if this is going to be my first role and I'm not going to be seen on camera, I'll be as free as I want, which played into the freedoms of the character at the beginning of the movie.
Yes.
And then, okay, I think he got the psychology of it. He understood the psychology, which is so much better than what more modern presentations have done.
Yeah. So see, Invisible Man, if you haven't seen it, absolute classic film.
Yeah, that's a 6-star.
Yeah. Shall I choose another one, or do you want to go next?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. I'm going to hit a couple as much as we have time that probably aren't so well known. But next, we're going to talk about Wolfen. So this one's directed by Michael Wadley, whose claim to fame was that he was the director of the famous Woodstock documentary. And in fact, this is the only non-documentary film he ever made. And this was released in 1981, and although it's not a werewolf movie, you have that cycle of wolf movies like The Howling in 1980, and of course American Werewolf in London, which both of those are great too. But this one stars Albert Finney as this veteran NYPD detective who gets called back into duty after taking leave for personal problems because there's been a series of grisly murders going on in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And as he investigates, he of course begins to suspect that these were not the doings of man, but by something supernatural, which turned out to be mind-reading wolves. And one of the things, of course, this was shot on location in New York City, and a good portion of it was shot in the Bronx. And New York City in 1980 is not the New York City that it is now.
Right.
And there was, I mean, it was just starting to come out of financial ruin, and but you would see these pockets of wealth in between all this just urban disaster, and that the film kind of plays into that as part of the reason for the murders. But
right,
no, this was shot on location in NYC, mostly the Bronx. But I read like the only thing they actually constructed for the film was this derelict church, but like everything else you see in the Bronx, like you're seeing just as it really was, and it's just destruction, and it's really something. And of course, it's a perfect place to set a supernatural murder mystery.
Well, am I wrong? But you said it was telepathic wolves?
Wolves, yes.
I could have sworn it was more of an Indian legend with the skinwalker type thing.
Well,
than that.
Well, Indians do have something to do with it.
I mean, it's been a long time since I've seen it, so I may be remembering. I just remembered it being more like a skinwalker wolf type thing with Native American.
Well, it's kind of both, really.
Yeah.
But it's this movie also has some like really great cinematography, and I think it was one of the first movies to use thermographic vision to simulate the
right
predator's perspective, which of course would be done later again in movies like Predator, and I think this was one of the first movies. It features very early performances from Gregory Hines, Edward James Olmos, Paul Reiser has a cameo. Reginald Vell Johnson, who played the dad on Family Matters, has a cameo. But it's got an early music score by James Horner that's really, really creepy, and it's highly recommended. So Wolfen from 1981.
Well, since Mark mentioned earlier that Wolfman's got nards, let's talk about the Wolfman. That is my classic Universal book or film, rather. We'll just go straight to the Wolfman 1941 film on the Wikipedia page. This was one of Claude Rains' other leading characters, other than the Invisible Man. Incredible special effects for Wolf by Lon Chaney Jr. The transformation stuff that was going on. It's just really well done. This is the second picture after the less successful Werewolf of London, which was in 1935, which was still like, that one's even a good movie, but not as good as this one. And this one, Lon Chaney Jr. Is the titular character who's returning to his ancestral home and wanting to reconcile with his estranged father, Sir John Temple, which is played by Claude Rains. And it's just a lot of different stuff that I can't really get into. What do I like about this? But I think about this, and it's like the budget for this movie was $180,000.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of money for 1941.
Right.
But think about what they did with $180,000 at that movie. And the transformations that they did with that. Mark Andrew Smith says, I love how they spun those into the Versus movies, meaning Werewolf versus Dracula, Werewolf versus Frankenstein, and the Universal stuff. I wish that Aaron Lopresti were here to talk about that, because he's a big Universal Studio monster buff. That would be more his forte. I did tell him to come watch, but I haven't seen him pop in. So, it's interesting. I'm more of the originals only for the Universal stuff, as a rule of thumb. I think the Versus ones get a little too campy for me. Yeah, they're fun. Yeah, they are fun, but I guess they're just, I don't know, they maybe not quite as serious as the originals. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I grew up on AMC when they actually showed those all movies. Yeah, John can tell you about that, because that was his thing. He used to watch AMC all the time.
Yeah. AMC and especially Turner Classic Movies, but yeah, I used to watch AMC too.
But for those who don't know what AMC is, that's American Movie Classics. It was a network that, unfortunately, I don't think it's around anymore. But again, that's because people don't like to watch. A lot of
it became a pale imitation of its former self.
Yeah, I believe. Let's see. So there was that one for me. The Wolfman. There was also House of Wax, which was 1960, I believe.
1953.
Yeah, you're right.
Yep, with Vincent Price.
Yeah, Vincent Price, correct. Yeah. I don't know why. I know why, because it was supposed to be 3D, and I was thinking 3D was later than the 50s. But yeah, that's what I liked. What I liked a lot. I've never seen it in the actual 3D. I've only seen it in the so-called natural version. But that's always been a classic that I've liked.
And I found out recently, I did not know this, that it's actually a remake.
Mm-hmm.
And they just recently restored the original film, Mystery of the Wax Museum, and put it out on Blu-ray, which I haven't seen, but I'd be interested to see.
Okay, well, I have no idea on that one. Turner has some really great, amazing, and obscure westerns. Yeah, I don't know. I was never a Western guy either. That was my dad's genre, not mine. You know, he liked some of the Westerns back in the day. Hold on a second. I'm trying to find the other ones that I like, because there was just so many that I didn't have a chance to do. I thought I'd done stories on all of them, but I didn't. The Birds by Alfred Hitchcock, 1960.
Oh, here's your graphic.
Thank you. Yeah, there you go. Go ahead and read them what they describe it as.
Well, you know what's interesting is there's a website called Trailers from Hell, which they also post their content on YouTube, and where they have famous film directors, writers, and stuff give commentary on trailers. And Eli Roth did a trailer commentary for The Birds, and it's like if you watch the Birds, like the trailer for The Birds, like it's literally just Alfred Hitchcock talking for like 5 minutes, and he shows no footage from the actual movie itself until like the last second, and even then, it's one of the special effects process shots of the birds attacking, and it's like, as Eli wrote, like Hitchcock by this point, I mean, of course he had his TV series, he had done Strangers on a Train, To Catch a Thief, North by Northwest, Where to Go, Psycho. So he wasn't just like, he was a celebrity. Like everybody knew who he was, and so he knew that his name alone would get people into theaters, and apparently it worked. But
that's beside the point. I mean,
yeah.
Come on.
So, but the posters advertised the posters had him like quoted as saying it could be the most terrifying motion picture I ever made.
Right. I know.
And it certainly had to be one of his most technically difficult, I would imagine, pictures to make.
Yeah, you can't really see it on my screen, but it's there on the right on the poster.
Yeah.
Up across the top, it does say this could be the most frightening feature film I've ever made, signed by Alfred Hitchcock up top.
Yep.
So, this is what I was able to do. As you can see, I've got a lot of them here. Creep Show, The Fly, The Amityville Horror, The Exorcist, Poltergeist, Salem's Lot, The Lost Boys, John Carpenter's version of The Thing, which is and Nightmare on Elm Street. And we're going to talk about most of these before we're done tonight, if we got time. But go ahead and talk about The Birds, though.
Of course, The Birds. It's got Tippi Hedren, aka Melanie Griffith's mother, in it, and Rod Taylor. And I think what I like about this movie is like you are in the mindset of the characters, in that like there's never an explanation provided about why the birds attack. And I've heard people say like it's like the randomness of tragedy that can sometimes place where things happen that you have no explanation for or control over, and how you're forced to deal with those circumstances. And in a strange in a strange way, the bird attacks are what brings the family together.
There's the another version.
Yeah.
There it is. It could be the terrifying motion picture I've ever made. Alfred Hitchcock signed. And remember, the scream you hear may be your own.
Yeah.
and you see, it didn't just have. Oh shoot! You just named her.
Tippi Hedren.
Yeah, that's a Jessica Tandy. That's
and
it had a lot of really name people who would go on to have really good careers in this film. That I was just really surprised that they did that.
And one thing about Hitchcock, like Hitchcock really knew how to draw you in and keep you there. And one of my favorite scene of the film is when Tippi Hedren, Suzanne Pleshette plays a school teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a scene in the film where she's waiting outside the schoolhouse on a bench for school to let out. And behind her, like, at first, like, you see one bird parked on the jungle gym. And then, like, every time the camera goes past that jungle gym, it's like more birds have gathered and more birds have gathered until, like, they almost fill up the whole frame. And you just, like, you're, like, really on edge. Like, something's going to happen. You don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but something's going to happen. And Hitchcock was just the master of, they didn't call him the master of suspense for nothing.
Right.
But he really knew how to draw you in and keep you hooked.
Yeah. And it's just really, even the ending is so eerie because as the characters are fleeing in the car, they announce that this is still going all over the world, or at least all over the California coastline, and the National Guard's can be called in. And you think, and they're driving away, and the birds are all perched, menacing, and that's how it ends. You don't really know why they're attacking. There's no resolution to it, so to speak, and it makes you wonder: could this actually happen? And that's part of the terror of it.
And again, talking again about special effects. And some of the special features on the Blu-ray, they talk about that last shot, and when you hear how incredibly difficult that last shot was to pull off, and if you look at it and you can't tell, like it looks seamless.
Right. That's amazing. Yeah, that's the one. I think a lot of people, modern people, I guess you could say younger, 30 and under, really don't know the magic of that stuff. Because, like you say, everything's done CGI. We just take it for granted today, I guess. But that's another one of that's probably my favorite Hitchcock film of all time is The Birds. Which I guess kind of plays into me being a Raven. I don't know. But then you'd think I would like other things, but I don't know. It's just that one always kind of freaked me out more than his other ones. Partly because you really don't know what's going on. You don't know why it's happening. And there's never any explanation given. With Psycho, you know what's going on. You understand the human conditions involved. With his suspense stuff like North by Northwest or the one where Rear Window, that's what I was trying to think of. All these things are psychological human condition but this is something that is truly terrifying because you don't understand it. I think is why I like that one so much. So
I think I heard it could be Steven Spielberg. I don't know, but it's like somebody described the birds as Hitchcock's version of a monster movie,
mm-hmm.
and it totally is.
Yeah, it is. Let's talk about one you got.
All right. Another obscure one. I'm going to talk about Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Yes.
This, of course, this was based on the Ray Bradbury story. He wrote the screenplay for it. So this is from Disney. This was released in 1983, and people today look at Disney as being this huge corporate behemoth that has always done well. And the fact is, there was a time from 1967, after Walt passed away,
to about 1985,
to where like Disney was really unsure of itself, and they were because and I've heard it referred to as Disney's dark age.
But some of their greatest films came out of that era.
Exactly, and so you had they were doing their family films, like you had the Aristocats, Robin Hood, the Rescuers, Pete's Dragon, Fox and the Hound, all during that time. But then you saw them; they were trying to reach out to a different audience. So like you had the Black Hole, which was their very first PG rated film, or at least I've heard that it was.
No, I think they maybe. I'd have to look that up.
But then what's really interesting is you had they were attracting people that would probably never normally make a Disney film, like
Black Hole and Dark Cauldron.
the Black Cauldron, and for all its faults, I think the Black Cauldron is I love the Black Cauldron. I'd rather watch the Black Cauldron than Frozen 2 or Ralph Breaks the Internet. Personally.
Wow. Yeah.
It's like it's better to be an interesting failure than a boring success.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Disney at this time were attracting people that wouldn't probably normally make a Disney movie, mm-hmm. like they had John Huff, who did like a movie called The Legend of Hell House with Roddy McDowall, and they bring him in. He does the two Witch Mountain movies, and he does the Watcher in the Woods. With Betty Davis, who, let's face it, you don't think of Disney when you think of Betty Davis. But for Something Wicked This Way Comes, of course, it's based on Ray Bradbury, and it was directed by Jack Clayton, who had done a movie called The Innocents with Deborah Carr, based on a Henry James horror story. So again, it's very, I would give this a 3 out of 5 stars, because you can tell that Disney interfered and changed some things that Ray Bradbury and Jack Clayton probably had not intended. I don't know what scenes, but if you read about it on IMDb and stuff, you'll there were scenes that were cut out, because Disney thought the special effects weren't up to par, but then they add like and I should pause and maybe briefly describe the plot for those who don't know about it, but it's in this small town in Illinois, and it concerns these two boys, which I don't know if you can see them well in the picture. These,
Hold on a second. There we go.
yeah,
Barely, but yeah.
okay. These two boys, and one of the boys' dads is played by Jason Robards.
Mm-hmm.
And one day, a circus comes into town. Um, Mr. Dark's Pandemonium Carnival. Mr. Dark is played by Jonathan Pryce, um, and of course the circus atmosphere hides something very, very sinister that I won't get into right now, but like Disney cut out scenes, and then they added scenes, like they let go of Jack Clayton, and then they brought in somebody else to do reshoots. And there's a couple of scenes that were shot a year after principal photography was done, and you can very obviously tell that the boys were older.
Mm.
But this movie is well worth watching. It's
Definitely.
It's beautifully shot, for one thing. The cinematographer was Stephen H. Buram, who shot a lot of 80s movies. Like, he shot The Outsiders and St. Elmo's Fire and The Untouchables and Casualties of War and stuff like that. And so it's beautifully shot. But I have to say, the main reason to see this film is Jonathan Pryce as Mr. Dark. It's like you cannot take your eyes off of him. He is terrific.
And Bradbury actually wrote the screenplay for this.
Yes.
And I think he had something to do with direction as well. And I think that's part of why there was some conflict. I could be mistaken. But he was very focused on having Pryce really be the star as well.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted that because he wanted the audience to feel the allure of the character and why the boys felt the allure of that character.
Yeah. I always felt that would be a terrific double feature with another movie called The Seven Faces of Dr. Lowe. I don't know if you've heard of that one before.
I've heard of it. I've seen it.
Yeah, it's that one's a movie directed by George Powell, who did The Time Machine and War of the Worlds. And Seven Faces of Dr. Lowe stars Tony Randall, who really does play 7 different characters. It's the kind of movie that Peter Sellers normally would have done, but the studio wanted Tony Randall, and it was written by Charles Beaumont, who wrote some Twilight Zone episodes.
Right.
And like, those two movies would make a terrific double feature, because they both deal with these magical circuses that come to this small town, and you have a charismatic figure as the I won't say ringmaster, but for lack of a better term, and how that circus has an effect on the entire town. One ultimately turns out to be for good, and one for evil.
Right.
That'd be a terrific double feature.
You were correct, apparently, about Black Hole being the first PG. I could have sworn there was another one before that, but I just looked through IMDb for all of Disney's movies from 70 to 79, and the only one that's a PG is Black Hole. So that must have been the first, because I know they didn't have any in the 60s that were PG. So I don't know why I thought they had another one. That was it. Here's the thing. I think that if they did Witch Mountain and Return to Witch Mountain, one with Eddie Albert, not the remake with The Rock. But if they had done that in the 80s, they would have got a PG rating.
Yep.
And that's why I was thinking those had to be PGs. And those came before Black Hole. But, but oh well, not a big deal. But let's see, what else we got here? Let's talk about Salem's Lot. Whoops. It doesn't want to show it. Why not?
And I hate to admit I have not yet seen Salem's Lot. It's one of those I keep meaning to, and I haven't gotten around to it yet.
I watched the 1979 two-part version.
Okay.
The original one with David Soul is the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
David Soul and James Mason. It's a combination of vampires and haunted house storyline. And it's based on a 1975 horror novel by the same name by Stephen King. This is probably my favorite Stephen King movie Stephen King related movie overall. And it was made for TV on the CBS. It aired at CBS originally, and I think it's one of Tobe Hooper's first films. I could be mistaken, but Tobe Hooper.
Well, he had already done Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Okay, well, it's one of his earliest ones.
Yeah,
but yeah, like I said, it's a two-part thing, and as I recall, it aired on CBS originally. This aired in '79, so I was like 7 years old when I saw it. And I just kind of, I don't know. It's very interesting, and some of the stuff in this film actually, the vampires are like a blue Nosferatu instead of a vampire, and I think that stuck with me more so than anything else. But the other thing was I wanted to watch it because I recognized David Soul as whichever character he plays in Starsky and Hutch.
Right.
Yeah. And I was just like, okay, this is interesting. I wanted to see what it was. And I can remember it giving me nightmares for like 2 weeks where I was just thinking this blue vampire Nosferatu guy was going to chase me all over the place. But it's not necessarily the greatest film ever. It's just something that really stuck with me because of my age at the time when I watched it. Mm-hmm. For a 7-year-old to watch something like that, it gets pretty intense. Mm-hmm. Watching it as an adult, I watched it not that long ago, maybe about 8 or 9 months ago again. And it's still good. It's still interesting, but it's like a 3.5. Whereas I was thinking of it as a 4.5. It's actually more like a 3 to 3.5 movie, but still enjoyable. Mm-hmm. Let's see what else. You had some other stuff that you were watching. How about The Shining?
The Shining. And I don't really know what I can say about The Shining.
We should say this is Kubrick's version. This is the version that Stephen King thinks sucks. This is the version. And yet it's a classic.
It's like, I'm not sure what can be said about The Shining that hasn't already been said by many other people, but and again, I just it just drew me in and kept me there, and I just loved it, and of course, everybody talks about Jack Nicholson,
Well, Jack, basically he carries the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there are some wonderful, interesting scenes in the movie, but I'm kind of like Stephen King on this. I've never really liked this film for some reason, but I don't like any of the versions of it. Not this one. I like the newer ones that he approved either. I don't know what it is. Love the book. Love the story. I think it's that I don't like Shelley Duvall in this film. I don't like her character. I don't like her performance as well. How do I explain it?
I do like it, and I'm
saying I'm not saying you're wrong to like it or anything.
And it's like it can't have been.
That's just interesting that we both have kind of opposing sides on this one. That's all.
And I've always liked it, but then you read about what Stanley Kubrick put her through on the set.
That's true.
And it is like, heck, who wouldn't end up hysterical like that?
Yeah. I'm not saying her performance was bad or anything. I just for some reason, she's never really appealed to me as an actress in anything I've seen her in particularly. This is probably one of her best performances overall. But like you say, I mean, she was terrorized, psychologically traumatized to the point where she had to go seek psychiatric help after the filming.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not the only woman that's gone through this. This is something that happens a lot, and it's just that it's not talked about. A lot of women get emotionally stressed on these kind of things, and the directors don't know when to lay off.
But I thought the sets for the Overlook Hotel in this film are amazing.
Yeah. There's some really dynamic graphics, scenes and sets and stuff that, like, where he's walking through the snow towards the hotel in the blinding snow, or the blood that runs through the
yep
the hallways of the hotel.
Comes out the elevator doors.
Yeah. And it's like, you see some of that stuff, and it's like, okay, yeah, I get why people dig this, but like I said, I don't know what it was. I did not feel a connection to the kid or the wife in the movies at all.
And have you seen Dr. Sleep?
No, I haven't. I wasn't interested in it. I know it's a sequel, but
yeah, I liked Dr. Sleep. I thought they did good, but
okay. Well, that's
anyway. Fair. There's The Shining.
Yeah, like I said, no, it's definitely, it belongs on the list. I'm not knocking it. It's just, it's one of yours, not one of mine. That's all.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. I guess, I mean, I got so many here. Like I said, we can talk about The Exorcist, maybe.
Okay.
Let me see here. It's kind of being silly here. That was made in 1973. Yeah. Let's see if I can get this thing to do what it's supposed to. It's not wanting to work with me here. There we go. Based on the 1971 novel by the same name. Written by William Peter Blatty, who also did the screenplay. And it stars Ellen Burstyn, Max von Sydow, Lee J. Cobb, Kitty Wynn, and Jack McGowan in his final film role, Jason Millen. And of course, the person who really kind of steals the show, Linda Blair as the little girl who gets possessed by the demon, and her mother's attempt to rescue her through an exorcism conducted by 2 Roman Catholic priests. It was very, very difficult to cast this movie. The studio did not want the cast at all. Vigorously opposed them on this. And there was also a really weird, it's like a curse on the movie. The sets burned down during photography. There were, it was like a cursed movie in a way, which is very ironic given what the topic is about, and everything.
And then the extreme reactions it provoked from its audiences.
Yes, definitely. And when we say extreme reactions, we're not talking about like a person going on the internet and going, "I hate this movie, it sucks." No, we're talking about in the theater, these people were actually getting nauseated, throwing up, just having an actual physical, visceral reaction to this movie. It's one of the most visceral movies ever made in that respect. And it's not just I don't want to call it the gore of it, because it is somewhat gory, I guess, but there's just an eeriness, an unnaturalness to it, that they really captured the demonic element of possession. And this is not, it's not as much, pardon me, it's not so much that it's based or not based on a true story, which there's been debates over that ever since it was made. But it was really interesting because for foolish reasons. I mean, here's, they wanted to change the ratings board because and charge the ratings board that they gave the film an R rating instead of an X rating, because some people in the rating group thought it deserved an X rating, which means it would not be a commercially successful film during this period, because this is 1973. Several cities made efforts to ban it, or at least prevent children from seeing it. And, I think that's just common sense stuff as far as not letting children see the film. I mean, if it's an R movie, it's not for anybody under 17.
Right.
It's common sense. I mean, what is this movie about? Figure out what the movie's about. And do I really want to take my 7-year-old to that? Especially in an era in that time where we saw blood and gut and violence and gore because we had just gotten through Vietnam. We saw it, we were desensitized from it in that aspect. But this is not soldiers' bodies being sprayed, and we know that's unfortunately how it is. This is something that is, literally just, her head's spinning. It's yeah, I don't understand why people would send their kids to that or take their kids to that. So I think it's funny that they had such a kerfluffle over it in that respect. It did become the first horror film to be nominated for an Academy Award for Best Picture, which I thought was an interesting notice. And it was the highest grossing R-rated horror film until the release of It in 2017. So for over 40 years, almost 45 years, it was the highest grossing R-rated horror film in cinematic history. So I think it's definitely, one of the best horror films ever made in that respect. And it actually is part of the National Film Registry for being, as they call it, culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. I would say it's more culturally significant in a way because of the way it portrayed not just uh, the horrifics of the demonic possession, but way the church was presented as well in the film. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Um, as someone who is a churchgoer and religious person, what did you think of that side of that representation in that film?
Um, and again, it's been ages since I've seen it.
Right.
So my memory is, I remember the head spinning and the vomiting pea soup, but I don't remember much about the the um the preacher character. So
Mm-hmm.
um the and I mean it's
Well, the thing is the story was based. Well, it wasn't based on. It was inspired by an actual exorcism that was performed in St. Louis in 1949 by a Jesuit priest, Father William S. Bowden. Um, and they couldn't really understand that the boy's behaviors, the boy instead of girl, was attributable to demonic possession, and then called on the services of several Catholic priests, including Bowden, to perform an exorcism on it. And it was one of only 3 exorcisms to have been sanctioned by the Catholic Church in the U.S. at the time. This is 49. Um, Later analysis by paranormal skeptics, um, they say that it was that the kid was mentally ill, of course, and maybe he was. There's a difference between, uh, but I love what they did with this by making it a girl instead of a boy, and then making it. The Exorcist kind of plays into something else. Another film that's later that we're going to talk about, Poltergeist. There's a similarity to those two, that supernatural, crazy, thing going on. But and like I said, Linda Blair was just a sensation after that movie. I don't know. The film came out in 73, so I didn't see it until 84 or 85, I think, is when I saw it. I was like 12 or 13 when I first saw it. And I can remember being creeped out by it. So, again, one of the best films of all time for horror. So, what else you got?
well um this next film actually has a connection to The Exorcist. And every now and then I enjoy a good B movie, especially a classic 50s B movie. And Dick Smith, who was the makeup artist on The Exorcist,
Mm-hmm.
this movie is one of his first efforts, and it's called The Alligator People. Um, and The Alligator People stars Beverly Garland, who was I had never heard of her before I saw this, but apparently she was known for doing B movies like this. And it also stars Lon Chaney Jr. And what it's about is so so this couple is on their wedding day, and they're on this train, and the husband gets a message, and he tells his wife he has to answer this message, but he gets off the train, and the train leaves before she can catch him, and she doesn't see him for years, and she finally um, tracks down this clinic in the Louisiana Bayou,
Mm-hmm.
and it turns out her husband, what had happened is he had a terrible accident, and he was saved by a scientist and his wife, and he was saved by injecting him with alligator serum. So it's kind of like Kurt Connor's The Lizard in Spider-Man type of thing.
Okay.
And of course, the intended effect was that he would be able to heal and grow new skin from.
Generate, right, like the alligators do, right.
Needless to say, things don't quite work out that way.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Lon Chaney Jr. plays this this drunken Cajun who resides at this bayou clinic. He has a hook for a hand. He got the hook because it was bitten off by, surprise, surprise, an alligator. So surprise, surprise, he hates alligators and does everything he can to kill everyone he sees.
Right.
So,
do you have the DVD in there again?
Yeah.
Okay. The alligator people. Okay.
Yeah. But again, it's nicely photographed, widescreen, black and white. But it was one of Dick Smith's very first jobs, and of course, I mean, it's one of those cases where yes, the final Alligator Man transformation is cheesy, but that's exactly the charm of it.
Okay. When was this movie made again? 1960?
59, I believe. 1959.
All right.
And it was.
There's a difference between cheese and limitations of the era too.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say it's more limitations of the era if it's that old. It's hard to say, because there was limitations back then, whereas today,
But for what they had to work with, the makeup is actually quite good.
I was going to say.
And interesting side note, this was released by 20th Century Fox, and they had previously done The Fly, which of course turned out to be a big hit. Mm-hmm. And so when they were doing Return of the Fly, Alligator People got greenlit because Return of the Fly was a black and white widescreen production, and they wanted another movie to go, a black and white widescreen movie to go along with it, so they could show it as a double feature.
Right. Okay. It's funny that you bring up The Fly. You've got the old Fly.
Yes.
Which is tell everybody about the old Fly, the classic Fly.
So the classic Fly, from 1958, it has Vincent Price in it, and but the actor who plays the main scientist's name is Al Hedison, and he's a scientist attempting to transmit matter through space, and he builds device in the basement of his house, where you have two separate chambers. So you can place an object in one chamber, and it is supposed to transfer the matter, and the object is supposed to come out in pristine condition in the other chamber. Um, and his first few experiments don't work out, and he finally decides to try it out on himself. What he doesn't know is that a fly has entered the chamber with him, and so when he comes out on the other side, um, his DNA has been mixed with the fly's DNA, and it's another film where the the creature is kept hidden until the end, so it builds suspense like that. Like there's one part where he accidentally reveals the fly's claw, but the movie is famous for two sequences. One where his wife finally uncovers and sees the fly's head, and you see this optical special effects image of her through a fly's perspective, as she screams. And so the other famous moment is, of course, if they're going to fix him, of course, they have to find the fly that has the other half of his body. And at the end of the movie, um, we see that the fly has been caught in a spider's web, and he has the fly's body with the man's head, and it's where the iconic "Help me" comes from, as he tries to scream for help, to unfortunately to no avail. But the original Fly is a terrific movie. If you haven't seen it, highly recommended. And there you are.
Yeah, yeah. And whereas he likes um, the original, I like the '86 remake by David Cronenberg with Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis. That's probably because that was the first one I saw. I was 14 when I saw it. One of the few films I actually did go to see in the theater for horror films. Let's see here. I'm trying to get it to show, and it's not wanting to, and that's annoying. That's why. Okay. There we go. And of course, this is it's the same story. It's the exact same story as what you were describing. It's just more more special effect oriented, more modernized graphics and makeup effects more than anything else. I would say maybe a little more cynical, but basically the same story.
And
I wish I could. I'm trying to find the imagery.
I think it's one of Jeff Goldblum's very best performances.
Yeah. I mean, here we'll just do it this way, where you can see the transformation, because the transformation was very important. You can see different pictures here, where he's going from different evolutions. from here, and I think that whole transformation process throughout the movie is what makes the movie in this case. Whereas in the original, it wasn't really so much about the transformation because he was always hiding the transformation from everybody. Yep. And you get the claw reveal and you get the other reveal at the end there, like you say, which was, I agree with you that the honeycomb camera effect was nice. But, this is about not just it's weird because to me, when I was watching this, I was thinking about it because this came out in '86 and my grandmother died of intestinal strangulation, but she had cancer as well. So I was looking at it as that's what cancer is. And the whole transformation of how it ravages the body and everything. And I could just see that, I made that mental connection in my head. And I think that was why it spoke to me the way it did. I was not, the only thing I was like, why does Gina Davis like that ugly looking guy? I for some reason, I just never thought Goldblum was the most handsome guy in the world, but it's weird, but overall, it was just, a good overall film. I just love the changes of, how it goes from here's a good one. We can get to show. Where is it? Now that's all the. Here we go. Let's see. There. It didn't want to show it anymore. Okay. That sucks. It didn't want to show what I wanted it to show. Well, now you can see it, sort of. You can see at the very top of the screen where he's really nice and calm and kept, and then he's a little bit, and you just see the transformation as he goes from into the fly. But I wanted it so that we could see, and that's why it's not doing it. Okay, now I know why it's not showing it. Just give me a second. I'll show a better image of it so everybody can see better. There we go. That's much better. You can see the transformation from decent looking guy. He's still a decent looking guy. What the heck? What the hell? As it keeps going and transforming. And I just thought that was really well done for the graphics and stuff. So, yeah. But both versions are certainly worth watching. You are more old school than me when it comes to a lot of that stuff. I don't know if that's because of just, your family does like movies.
Right.
My parents were not big movie people or anything. I kind of came into films much later in life in general.
And, my family does like movies. They don't like horror movies, which is why I didn't start watching them until later.
Right.
In life.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's see. I think we've been on this thing for almost we've been on for 3 hours, dude. It's time to call it a night. There's a lot of stuff. There's so much stuff that we can be talking about. But I want to thank you for being on with me for tonight. Do you want to try again next week and finish this off, or do you want to go with let me go with another genre?
Oh no, we can. I'll check my schedule, but hopefully we can finish this off.
Okay. Yeah, let's come back next week then and finish this off as part and talk about a little bit four more films, because I've got so many other films. We haven't talked about Creep Show. We haven't talked Amityville Horror. We haven't talked about Lost Boys, Poltergeist, Nightmare on Elm Street. lots of stuff that we haven't talked about. And you've got stuff that you haven't talked about as well, I'm sure.
Yep.
So let's go ahead and do that. I want to thank you all for watching and putting up with us for so long. I hope we haven't bored you too much to tears. Maybe we've bored you to screams. I don't know. But yeah. But yeah, we'll be back next week. We'll talk about some of that stuff. And in the meantime, John, when's your next play going to be? Do you know?
Our next play, for those who don't know, I work with a theater group. I live in Columbia, but I work with a theater group in Lexington called Onstage Productions. And miraculously, we are still able to have rehearsals. We are following social distancing protocol. But our Lord willing, our next show is Footloose, the musical, and it will premiere the last weekend of February and go for 3 weekends.
Okay.
Lord willing.
Lord willing. Yeah. And if he's not willing, we won't do it. But yeah, it's crazy, but okay. And you guys can reach me on social media. On Facebook at Lewis.BrightRaven. On Twitter at LewisBrightRave2. At DeviantArt@DeviantArt.com/BrightRaven. On YouTube at Quoth the Raven, Lewis Bright Raven. If you want to email me questions, or maybe you want to talk to us and say some suggestions on other films or TV shows we didn't talk about, Quoth the Raven LBR72@gmail.com or LewisBrightRaven@yahoo.com. Alrighty. Just fixing my site here. We'll have more graphics to be up on things for next week. And that having been said, we thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Good night, everybody.